We have a quorum.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna unmute, okay? Are you okay with me unmuting?
Yep.
Okay. Yep.
They're there, okay. Good afternoon. Be it Thursday, December 17th, and we are before 18. I call this Transit Commission meeting to order. We have a quorum present, and my first item is, or my second item, I guess, is public comments. Are there any? I don't see, we don't have a public here, so we will move on. Approval of minutes of September 17th, 2020. They're in your packet. Any concerns, additions, subtractions? Otherwise, I'll take a motion to accept. Motion by Peckham, second by Pizzato. All in favor? Oh, too
I don't know
fast.
if we need to take this up now, but I'm just wondering, the minutes that we received prior to this meeting for the 17th and 24th were very detailed, and I think it was good that they were because of the subject matter, but I'm wondering if we could switch to something more concise in the future. I don't know. For my inclination, we could do with less of the detail and more of the kind of a overview, and I know that gets to be difficult for the person doing it, but anyway, thoughts on that?
Those in my office will be very pleased to hear you say that. We struggle with how much detail to provide. We want it to be understandable. I participate in a number of various committees, and I have everything from this level of detail down to kind of the gist of what was discussed. So we can do whatever you'd like. I would agree that it is a lot of work to get all of this detail. So if you want less, we can
Yeah.
work in that direction.
It's a different kind of work to decide to narrow it down, but I think it
Yeah.
would be better to get the essence of it and go from there.
Okay, we'll work on that.
With a motion on the floor to accept the minutes of September 17th, all in favor say aye.
Aye?
Aye, and that passes unanimously. I have a question about number 4. I guess not. Okay. Approval of minutes of September 24th, 2020 are also in your packet. We had those meetings pretty close. Any questions, concerns of those minutes, or?
I would also move that they be approved.
Okay, great. Second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Kathy? Okay, any other questions or concerns? Otherwise, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and those are, okay. Discussion and possible action on contract award for floor scrubber / sweeper.
I provided at your table today a summary of the bids that we received earlier this week. They were opened by the Board of Public Works. This is a floor scrubber sweeper that we use in our garage and shop area to clean the floors. The previous unit is a 1999 vintage and is obsolete. They don't make parts for it anymore. But anyway, this was originally to be financed 100% with City of Wausau funds. Subsequent to being approved by the CIP committee and the council, I got a federal grant to cover 80%. So the bid is just a bit over the $49,000 budget, but because I got the 80% federal funding for it, the city's share will still be considerably less than we budgeted. So I would recommend that it be awarded to the low bid, which is Wisconsin Lift Truck.
Can I just ask, was there a difference in scrubbers with these 3 bids, or was it just the bids that were different?
Well, we had several vendors come in And the one we liked was not the low bid, it was a nicer unit. The low bid is very similar to the one we already have. You know, it's perfectly fine. I also had to do a reasonableness calculation. So I looked at bids that were received earlier this year by the city of Appleton for a very similar unit, and it was within a few $1,000s of what was bid. So, yeah, there's a difference, I think, in the quality of the units bid, but we're perfectly happy with the low bid unit as it is similar to the one we have.
Is this for concrete floors?
Yes.
Okay. And it'll take up, like if there's oil or something like that, the cleaner will get rid of that?
Yeah, there are two things that we are most concerned about. One is the oil droppings on the floor. You know, we don't want people to fall. So that's a workers' comp issue. But in terms of the longevity of the concrete, the de-icing agents that we bring in, the chemicals, street chemicals, are far more corrosive than they used to be. And we've noticed over the last 6-8 years pitting on the floor from the chemicals. And so we're very much interested in cleaning that off the pavement on a regular basis.
Any other questions? If not, I'll take a motion to accept and to, that we'll recommend this to the full council, that we accept this bid.
Or you could opt to just accept it and
Is that it?
we'll make the award. It's up to you.
Well, let's just do that. We'll get it done today.
I would just assume that were the case. This grant is a 2020 grant, so.
Yep. Yeah,
I'd
and
like to-
we're not having any more council meetings this year,
Right.
hopefully. So, as I look at her,
I just sent you a solution.
okay, oh, good. I'm looking forward to seeing the solution. Okay, so yes, I would like, let's just finish this up. It's such a minimal amount for the city anyway with the grant. So this would be a motion to accept this bid and purchase this floor scrubber.
I'll move to accept the bid and purchase a new floor scrubber sweeper. Woohoo!
Great,
Second it.
perfect. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And that passes unanimously. Number 6, discussion and possible action on approval of a public transit agency safety plan.
As I said in my memo, the Federal Transit Administration is trying to get its arms around safety in the transit industry. And so they've created a framework for which to make that happen. Part of that framework is the preparation of safety plans by all public transit systems, and that's what this is. This is our first public agency safety plan, PTAS, as we in the biz call it. And it is, I guess in theory, really kind of the culmination of what we should already be doing. It's putting in a single document the policies, procedures, how it is that we are going to address transit or safety at Metro Ride. So this lays out who will be in charge of it, provides a basic framework and a plan as to how we're going to address safety. There are a little bit of safety training identified. Other than the rail systems, there is no training that's mandated for systems our size. So we're going to do some awareness training to get started in, you know, the basic of system safety management. But I think it's pretty straightforward. The one difference that we're going to have to address is the creation of a safety committee. Over the years, we've had a number of different committees. We've had union committees, we've had employee committees. We used to have an accident review committee, and for various reasons, those committees came to some conclusion. So this will be a new effort And we've already had discussions with the union about the role of line employees in evaluating incidents that may end up with discipline. You know, so the concern is, do we want to weigh in on issues that may end up being grieved at a later date? So it'll be an interesting process, and we hope it will be fruitful. But anyway, this plan requires, when I wrote the memo, I thought it had to be approved by the end of the year. Friday, the Federal Transit Administration issued a notice of, I forget what they call it, but discretionary delay or whatever, enforcement delay. What it means is it's not now due until July of next year. So we're ahead of the game now.
Perfect.
Any questions about the document or the plan? Yes?
Thank you. Is the organizational chart on page 21, is that basically the same organizational chart that you've been operating under?
Yes.
Okay, so then you've got a position at that middle level as Chief Safety Officer, but that's not all that person does. That person is also operations supervisor?
Correct. Correct.
Okay. And how much time of that person's week would be Chief Safety Officer? A few hours or a day or?
Well, it's at this point just a title, and we're going to find out what's involved, how many hours we're going to have to dedicate to this process. You know, in some ways, this is, as I said, kind of documenting what we already do, but the safety committee will be a new task. There's a level of reporting in here and follow-up required on incidents that occur that we're made aware of. So we'll quantify that a year from now and be able to update this document. But for now, we really don't know. I just assigned the title to one of my operations supervisor because he handles a lot of our safety stuff.
Okay. And then to what extent was this a template that was localized, and to what extent was this something you had to cook up yourself?
Well, it's the state of Wisconsin put out a small system template. That was their role in this, and we could opt into their plan. After going through the process and using their template, it really becomes your plan. So I'm not, although we said we'd opt in, I'm not sure we really are part of their plan because each system really did their own based on the template. It wasn't as simple as, you know, fill in the blank. There were some kind of general areas that you had to fill in what your system is doing. The safety training, there was a section for safety training, and it's all optional for us. So you had to choose, well, what level of training do we want to embark on? There are some requirements for the system safety officer, but for the rest of the staff, there's no requirement whatsoever. So we had to fill in those blanks. So it was time consuming, I would say that. It took a while. But, you know, this is, there are some things in here that I will readily admit are already out of date, and one of them is our organizational chart. Peter Bierk has since retired, since I put this draft together. So, you know, that'll be one of the first things that we have to modify. But the rest, you know, this is supposed to be a living document. It'll be a work in process. So you'll see this again. It has to be approved on an annual basis by this body.
I have a question.
Yes.
On here, it says Metro Ride Organizational Chart, and it lists the Transit Commission. But in the next page or the next following pages, it doesn't mention anything about the Transit Commission. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. This is,
That's more staff safety rules and responsibilities.
right. Yeah, it's,
Okay.
it's internal staff, who's going to
Okay.
manage the safety function.
Okay,
You know, the Transit Commission role is at a much higher level than the execution of this safety plan. We felt it was important to note it in the organizational chart.
okay,
Not every transit system is organized the same way, so we felt it had merit to be in the document, but I don't think it needs to be in the subsequent pages.
okay.
Oops. Any further questions? If not, we'll take a motion to approve.
I'll move to approve the Public Transit Agency Safety Plan as executed.
Thank you.
Second it.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And that passes unanimously. Do you still need us to sign this?
I do.
Oh,
I have an original.
okay, thanks. We'll send it around.
And I'll have to track down Deb at a later date. As I said in the memo, this doesn't get submitted to the
It's
FTA,
the
this just goes on
17th
file.
today.
And they review us every 3 years, it's a triennial review,
Okay.
and so they'll review it at that time. So if we get signatures.
Yeah, well, get in line, huh? Okay, discussion and possible action on the financial report.
I included in your packet a financial statement through October 31st, 2020. Thank you. Let me start by saying this has really been an unusual year from a financial perspective. You know, we started the year struggling with the budget. You know, how are we going to manage to stay within our budget? And we ended up doing a fare increase before the year started. And then the pandemic hit, and it became very unpredictable. There were segments of our service we didn't run because school didn't operate. On the other hand, we put our part-timers to work doing cleaning and disinfecting, and so they were really working as many hours as they otherwise would if they were driving. But we weren't operating service for the schools, and so we saved a ton of money on fuel. They delayed the start of the school, but eventually we did start running what we call school tripper routes. We operate 10 school tripper routes. And now on top of operating those routes, we now need our part-timers to clean so that we can disinfect each bus on a daily basis and also get them clean. And so we're now actually paying probably more labor than we otherwise would. So it's just been a challenging year to predict. On top of that, we were awarded CARES funds, $3.2 million in CARES funds. And that's the really good news in this financial statement. Our strategy with the CARES funds is to pay down the city's portion of the budget so that we can build up our reserve fund. And the reason I advocated for that strategy is I anticipate we're going to see a rocky financial road ahead. The state has a biennial budget. I anticipate there's going to be a shortfall in the transportation fund, which could affect us. Heaven only knows what's going to happen on the federal level. Maybe there will be bipartisanship, maybe not. So I want to be prepared in case normal transit operating assistance wanes next year. I think in the coming weeks we'll get a sense what's going to happen for 2021 as far as federal operating assistance. But at the state level, I'm just not optimistic. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply CARES funds to offset the revenues that we're not collecting. Normally, we're collecting in the range of $300,000 or so. We stopped collecting those in March, so we'll use CARES funds to offset that loss. We're also going to diminish the city's share of the budget. The city had budgeted about $1.2 million for our portion of the budget. We're hoping to draw that down to about $200,000. And then that will go into our fund balance and give us some flexibility. It'll also give the city flexibility. Just because it's in our account doesn't mean it's ours, it's still the city's. And I know that was a big help going into 2021. Overall, we are, our revenue is about a third through about 83% of the year. And that's because we're not collecting revenue. Expenses are at about 70%, 69.4. So we are still under budget, and that's good news. The challenge for me is, so we get normal federal operating assistance, and on top of that, we get these CARES funds, and trying to figure out the mix of what to accept is very difficult. With normal operating assistance, it can only cover up to 50% of your deficit. If I'm drawing down CARES funds, I've got a smaller deficit. So trying to get the mix right without leaving money on the table is the real challenge. So my goal is to use every cent of state money that's available. Now, there's a 20% minimum match requirement for that. But it appears to me at this point that we're going to have $80,000 to $100,000 of unspent federal money. So my hope is the FTA will allow us to amend that grant and use it for other purposes, like capital procurement. We've got a couple service vehicles we could procure that they're in our planning documents for replacement, and so that's my plan. We'll see if the FTA allows us to do that. This is an odd year for the FTA. It's an odd year for WSDOT. WSDOT has said in our grant application process for 2021 that they will not use CARES funds as an offset to WSDOT funding received in 2021. So we're not going to get penalized if we're sitting on a pot of CARES funds. And that was one of the things that the transit community expressed loud and clear when they awarded this. You know, what about next year? Are you going to penalize us for this? The answer is no. I just don't know what the carryover possibility is for other funds, and I'm working on that now. So that's where we are. I had hoped to have the November financials and do a quick financial statement for one more month and get a better projection, but I didn't get those from the finance department yet, so this is as good as it gets. So any questions on financials? I did provide for you today a handout on the CARES Act grant, and it shows the in 2020, I'm projecting we'll use nearly $1 million in CARES funds on operating assistance, $987,000. That's just an estimate at this point. We purchased driver barriers, plexiglass driver barriers for $49,125. And so that's it for 2020. For 2021, there are, as I said, several projects that we could pursue. A service truck, a supervisor van, and fare boxes for nearly $600,000. I have several other ideas. You know, once year end kind of shakes out and gives us an idea where we stand with fund balances, I will present some ideas. One is I'd like to hire consultant services to take a look at fare collection and real-time customer information systems. I'd like them to kind of lead us to where we need to be. Eau Claire is in that process, and that's where I got the idea. There's a lot of technology that's come out in, the fairly recent past, and the pandemic has really kind of changed fare collection dramatically. Everyone has gone touchless. There are some web-based possibilities, that they will have some revenue shortfall implications, but nonetheless, there are some possibilities that would certainly, I think, appeal to a broader audience, and we ought to be exploring those. And you can poke around on the web all you want, but it's just hard to get your arms around that kind of stuff without hiring somebody. So I've spoken with IT, and they are ready to go as soon as I'm ready, when I'm comfortable enough to go, and I'm hoping that occurs in or about January. So that's where we are.
I have a question regarding that. Will they look at monthly passes, weekly passes, day passes?
I would say all of the above. So if you go to different electronic fare payments, say a web-based fare payment system, you can do almost anything. It downloads to your phone, so it's not a matter of printing a ticket and issuing a ticket. It's all digital. Of course, you have to have the equipment to make that workable, and that's one of the challenges in transit. There is a population who uses our services that does not have the technology to make that work. And so I don't think that cash collection systems are going to be going away anytime real soon, but I think we have to kind of nudge ourselves into the digital age and move in that direction. And it may be as simple as still collecting in a fare box, but having, touchless fare media. So instead of a pass, you would have the ability with a phone to be touchless, or it could still collect your cash fare. At this point, I don't even know what all the options are. But what Eau Claire has done is they've hired a consultant to kind of put together kind of a research paper for them. Here are the systems that are available, and then walk them through what your options are and let them decide. And then at the end point, they'll develop the RFP to get a vendor to provide, the real-time customer service app and the fare collection systems. So, I originally read their proposal, and it was, $80,000, and I thought, oh my gosh, $80,000. And then I started to do some research, and I thought, boy, that's probably worth every penny. You got to have the expertise in order to do the research and come up with proposals. And I don't know how else you get your arm around it, but to use the expertise of people who have the expertise. So anyway, I will continue to explore that and have some ideas for you in the coming months.
They also look at it ADA accessible for someone that's blind and visually impaired?
Well, part of
That,
Eau Claire's plan is real-time information like stop announcements while you're on board. That's something that we've talked about and just don't have at this point. You need some GPS.
well, that would be wonderful, because a lot of the drivers don't announce.
Yep.
the-
Yeah, and Kathy and I have had this conversation numerous times, and that is really a struggle in the transit industry. It's a requirement that we announce stops, we identify stops along the way that have to be announced. And it can be done automatically with annunciators and a GPS unit, or drivers announce. And the vast majority, drivers are supposed to announce. And universally, drivers hate it. And so it's like pulling teeth. But it is one thing that when we pull a videotape and we review it, it is one of the things that we will discipline for when we see it. And we've made that known, and we follow through. But it is an ongoing struggle. So, if there's one thing we get out of this information package, it would be that, this system that we install announces when we pass certain points along the route. And it's not just, it's great for people who are visually impaired, but it's great for people who are unfamiliar with the area. Or if you're reading a book, or,
Yeah, if you're just not paying attention,
yep.
it's, oh, here we are.
Exactly. That's like the ADA ramp is great for people in wheelchairs, but you know what? It's great for little kids too. The stuff that is designed for an ADA purpose is universally wonderful. So, we ought to be using it, and it's just a struggle.
I'm wondering, Greg, if Eau Claire's study was available, if we hired the same company, they'd be doing a study for a system that was somewhat similar for a community of a somewhat similar size. If it would be a matter of adapting that finding to Wausau.
You are not the first to have that thought. Yeah,
Go for it.
Eau Claire is a similar size. They have, one of the big differences in Eau Claire is that they're a university town. And so they deal with an awful lot of students. So it's similar, but that's a big difference. I don't know what kind of difference that makes for fare collection. They do a UPass program where they show a student ID and they ride for free. So, yes, that has occurred to me. Perhaps, and I'm sure they do this sort of planning everywhere, and to some degree it's cookie cutter. What we're really looking for from them is their expertise. But I know this consultant. I know personally some of the folks who are working there. If we're going to use federal funds to pursue this, we're certainly going to have a competitive process. So my first question to them will be, how did you seek these services? And we'll go from there. That's all I have for financial report.
And we're just going to put that on file, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, discussion and possible action on resuming the collection of passenger fares.
Just for your reference, I provided in your packet ridership reports for both paratransit and fixed route bus to give you a sense of where we are with ridership. As I said, we have been collecting fares since March. We're in the middle of a pandemic. We are limiting ridership to no more than 10 on a full-size transit bus and fewer on paratransit. So it is not a mystery that ridership is down. But what I did was try to use these numbers to make some projections in case you asked, well, how much revenue would we not collect? I don't have a very concrete answer, but here are the projections I've made. So we are carrying about, let's see, our average ridership is, where's the number? Average daily rides about 800 passengers a day currently. And as I said, that's down substantially, about 60%. And so I took that average daily ridership, and then I took our average fare, and it's just the revenue, passenger revenue we collected January, February, March, divided by the number of passengers we carried who were paying a fare to get an average fare. And so I just did the simple math. 800 rides currently times that average revenue collection per rider. And I've projected that here. And so that's, $14,000, $15,000, $16,000 a month in revenue at today's ridership level. So I just wanted to be prepared in case you asked, well, if we suspended fares for another period of time, what kind of revenue are we talking? I guess the first point I would make is that we're not at pre-COVID levels of ridership. So it's not like we've abandoned all of our ridership. 60% of our ridership isn't there anymore because of the pandemic. So what we're talking about giving up is what's left of that, which is 40% of our normal ridership. And that's what this projection is. So, as I said in my memo, we are one of the few systems, I couldn't find one in Wisconsin that was still not collecting fares. Most have resumed collecting fares at some point. I know a number of systems, Eau Claire, for instance, who was waiting until they had driver barriers installed, and then they started collecting fares. But that requires that you load people through the front door, which increases the risk for your bus operators. And then we have to process what we collect. So the tickets have to be counted, the cash has to be counted on a daily basis. So that involves my staff. So there is risk in collecting fares. Should you choose to start collecting fares in January, we have bus passes ready to go to the outlets, just in case. I would point out, as I did in my memo, that infection rates are higher now than they were when we stopped collecting fares. So, the circumstances that led us to not collect fares still exist. In terms of how would we pay for this, we'd pay for it just like we paid for it all along. We'd supplement with CARES funds. That's certainly a valid purpose. That's one of the recommended reasons that they awarded CARES funds in the first place. So that's the situation. Any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I would move, in light of the continuing risk from COVID-19 and continued concern for our staff and passengers, that we utilize the CARES funds for one of the purposes for which they were intended, and continue the non-collection of fares through March 31st, for now anyway.
You want to set a review date or?
Probably should look at it in February.
Okay, very good.
But, I think we didn't know what was going on, so, and, I think you said, well, let's do this, suspension of fare collection through the end of the year. Everybody said, oh, okay, that's as good a date as any. But now we know that the COVID is still with us, and so we should, I think, do the smart thing and continue with operations as they are now with safety in mind.
I second it.
Any other comments or questions about?
Just on, I would just like to comment that that would bring us to a full year of non-collection, so I like that date, just for it to all line up and be pretty.
Sorry, I'm doing the wrong. Okay, so we have a motion, and I just want to make sure, I'm going to clarify that we will bring this back February's meeting, correct? To look at a possible, to again look at a date beyond March 31st.
We would confirm the extension date, yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, all in favor say aye. Aye. And that passes. Transit Director's report.
As I mentioned earlier, this has been an interesting year from a personnel standpoint, not just budget, but personnel as well. We've been able to keep our folks busy, generally working them out of class. We've had part-timers doing our disinfection all by hand, wiping all surfaces down in the building at the transit center, in the vehicles. We were turning our fleet over every day, sending out disinfected vehicles. That became far more difficult when school started because we have far more vehicles in service on any given day. And so we've navigated to this schedule of kind of splitting up the fleet so that we can still get everything disinfected. And we've been able to do that because we acquired spraying and fogging disinfecting equipment. It is so much faster. And so what we do, the buses that come in from our regular routes at night, we go through and we spray them. Every morning after our morning peak time, we get all, kids to school, and then part-time drivers are held over and we disinfect those. Well, disinfection is one thing, cleaning is another. We're spending most of our time disinfecting, so we're neglecting cleaning a little bit. So we are down to once a week with a thorough clean. So we split the fleet in half, and on Wednesdays we spend time, part-timers are going through and cleaning front to back. And then on Friday, there's no school, so we do the other half. So it works. In the end, part-timers are getting more hours, I think, than they otherwise would, but it's pretty close. And so this has really been an interesting logistical puzzle. But the pieces have fallen into place. I don't know what we would have done had we not finally acquired our fogging equipment. It has just been a godsend. We are still loading through the back door. My union and employees in general will be happy not to be collecting the fares, and so they can maintain that distance. We are handing out masks again. So we had started to hand out masks that we got from Marathon County Emergency Government and the CDC earlier this year until they were gone. When we were handing them out, our compliance rate in terms of riders wearing masks was in excess of 90%. When the masks ran out, it dipped down to maybe 70%. It was very frustrating to watch the numbers continue to climb and compliance to decline at the same time. We also noticed that masks that were not intended to be disposable were being disposed after single use. They were wearing them as a ticket to ride and then not wearing them. We are now back to handing out masks, the disposable masks. We got another supply from Marathon County. We feel better about, handing out the disposable ones than we did about, the non-disposable in case they discard them. We don't think that we have the legal authority to deny a ride if someone is not in compliance. And generally what happens is, as I said, they use it as a ticket to ride, so they get on, and then they take it off. Well, now they're on. Well, now how do you get them off? It's not a matter of denying, it's getting them off, confronting them. And so we have opted to do like the police department does, and we just inform them. We ask them to wear the mask. They say, I don't have one, we offer one. But at this point, that's about as good as we think we can do. So that's where we are with COVID-19 protocols. Since the last time we met in person, we did have an outbreak at Metro Ride. In fact, our entire maintenance department was out. And that was the situation I'm most worried about because they work shoulder to shoulder at times. You do your best to keep them apart, but sometimes it's a two-person job and it's unavoidable. And our concern was if one got it, they'd all be gone, and that's exactly what happened. So coincidentally, our maintenance supervisor happened to be out on leave, extended leave for that same period, and so we had no one. So we managed, because school had not quite started yet, and so we didn't need as many vehicles. And then when the maintenance supervisor was back that following week, we got Cummins Diesel to come in and spend some time getting some vehicles back in service. And so there was a lot of finger crossing and, yep, yep. But we weathered the storm. We felt like it was a real accomplishment, and all we did was kind of wait and cross our fingers, but it worked out. Metro Ride staffing, Peter Burek, a Metro Ride operations manager for 37-plus years, retired 3 weeks ago. He's been my right-hand person for a long time, and he will certainly be missed. And I feel bad that there was no pomp and circumstance when he departed. This happened right after our big outbreak, and you know, we were talking as a staff how we're going to get together but distance, and you know, have individualized, you know, cake, and in the end Peter said, you know, I just don't think that's a good idea, and so let's just not do it. And so he worked a full day on his last day and said, okay, I'm done, here's my keys, and that was that. So at some point hopefully we can invite him in for some cake and celebrate properly, but he is gone. And since then, we have promoted Megan Newman to be our operations manager. Megan was one of our operations supervisors. And as of yesterday, we we opened up a recruitment for the operations supervisor position that's currently vacant. So
Will he be recognized in the Wausau Mayor's newsletter for all his service at Metro Ride?
that is an excellent idea.
We could put him in our city newsletter.
It's due on January 8th. Let's get it done.
That's a good idea, thank you.
Also, do we do resolutions here? Is that a thing? No?
Like a recognition proclamation?
Yeah.
I did, yeah.
You can do that, I mean,
Yeah, I could proclaim and declare and all kinds of
We
things.
can't hear you, Mayor. Sorry.
Could informally suggest that the mayor's office do that, and we could go from there.
They asked if I could proclaim or declare, and I can do both of those things.
Okay.
And proudly so. All right, I'll get you something. And that's all I have.
I got questions for Greg.
Yes.
Looking through the minutes, I was reminded of some of this stuff. As far as, but to stick with the COVID topic, you were talking about the number of staff had it. Is there any way to know whether anybody has contracted COVID because they rode the bus?
No, I was just talking to an operator today who said they are starting to see people that they've not seen in a while who are indicating that they weren't riding because they were positive, and now they're back. But there's no way to know where they contracted it. We've had a few issues on our paratransit program where a facility called and said, we need to get somebody to a COVID test. Will you provide the ride? And our answer was no. They were exposed. We wouldn't be able to convey them without exposing the driver, and so we said no. We consulted with HR and the health department, and we were advised to deny the ride, and so we did. We also I also did a group chat with other transit directors, and they've had a similar circumstance and handled it the same way.
Okay, thank you. How's the Island Place stop and the River Drive reroute? How's that going?
We don't track ridership separately for that segment of street or for any of those stops, but I did talk with both the morning driver, 6 to 2 driver, and then the 2 to 6:30 driver yesterday and today. And I would say that it is underwhelming.
Okay.
The morning driver said he's not picked up a single soul at Island Place since we started. The afternoon driver said he had a regular customer for a little more than a week and hasn't seen her since. We have had some complaints from the segment on Forest Street that we abandoned in order to make this loop happen. The post office stop was a popular one. And there's a stop before that one, west of that one for a professional building. It would have been the old Penny's Ramp stop. There are a couple regulars there who now have to walk a block and weren't pleased. So, as I explained before we made this change, it's a trade-off. We can move it from here to there, but, the people there may be happy, but the people over here may not be. And so we've seen some of that. I don't know. We'll see how it pans out. I mean, this is a senior living facility, and this is a pandemic, so it's really hard to gauge whether or not.
I would say there'd be especially leery of getting on a bus.
I would think.
We shouldn't pull the plug on them.
Yep.
You
Well, I had a similar conversation with, regarding the Rib Mountain pilot project. There was some debate as to what the measures should be for success. How would we evaluate what level of ridership would be appropriate? And I said, well, we're limiting ridership to 10 during the pandemic, and it's going to be no more than 10, and I don't know that that's going to compare very well to anything we've done previously. So doing a trial during a time when you're limiting your ridership is not going to give you the results you're probably looking for.
Yeah. How
So-
about concrete pads for benches on Grand Avenue? Any of that started?
I've not heard anything. No one's
Okay,
contacted
so that'll
me.
be spring?
When I
hopefully.
talked to Steve about that, he indicated that that was their intention to do it.
Very good.
He said they weren't in a big rush because they do it in the spring.
Okay, thank you.
If nothing else, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you. And second by Peckham. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are so adjourned. Thank you.